You've seen the videos, right? All over social media. These crazy-looking humanoid robots from China moving in ways that just don't seem real. I mean, they're pulling off moves with a speed and a grace that looks like it's straight out of a sci-fi blockbuster. It's this total flood of clips, and it really feels like something big is happening. So, okay, let's dive in. What's really going on here?
And that's the first question on everyone's mind. The movements are so unbelievably fluid, so dynamic, it's just natural to think, am I just looking at some really, really good CGI? So, are they real? Well, the answer is way more interesting than just a simple yes or no.
I mean, the clips are absolutely stunning. We're talking about armies of robots dancing in perfect unison at national galas. We're seeing humanoids nail these complex, high-impact martial arts kicks. There's even one robot that walked, get this, 66 miles without stopping. Another one can find its own charging station and swap its own battery. The sheer scale and just the variety of what they're showing off is honestly like nothing we've ever seen before.
So yeah, no surprise, the most common reaction online is just pure disbelief. When that video of Engine AI's T800 robot doing lightning-fast jumping kicks and spins dropped, people immediately called it out. They were like, no way, that's gotta be computer-generated. It just looked too good, too smooth to be a real physical machine clunking around. But here's where it gets really interesting. Faced with everyone yelling fake, the company's response was fascinating. They didn't just send out a press release, oh no. Engine AI straight up published the raw, unedited footage from their studio, showing the T800 robot performing those exact same kicks, no digital tricks. And Ubitech did the same thing with their hundreds of robots moving together. They released the behind-the-scenes video to prove it was a real fleet. So here's the first critical point. The hardware is absolutely real. These robots are physically doing these things.
Okay, but here's the big twist. Just because the robot is physically real, that does not mean it's thinking for itself. The truth behind these demos has a lot less to do with artificial intelligence and way more to do with amazing engineering and very, very careful planning. Alex Carter from Intelligent Living really hit the nail on the head. He said what we're seeing are carefully staged demonstrations. These aren't robots just deciding on their own to practice kung fu or break into a dance number. They're executing a highly polished, very specific script. So let's break that down. What does that actually mean? Well, take that 100-kilometer walk. It sounds amazing, but it was on a carefully planned route, supervised the whole way, with a support team right there to swap out batteries. And those dancing robots? That whole routine was pre-programmed. Choreographers and engineers spent weeks tuning every single little movement. The martial arts kicks? They're basically choreographed stress tests in a controlled lab to push the limits of the robot's balance. And when you see them working in factories, it's almost always in these super structured, fenced-off pilot zones, safely tucked away from any unpredictable people.
All right, so if these aren't truly intelligent, autonomous robots, why on earth are companies pouring so much money and effort into making these videos go viral? Well, the answer is that these demos are just the shiny, visible tip of a much, much deeper national strategy. A big piece of the puzzle is something people are calling fundraising theater, and it makes perfect sense, right? A video of a robot doing a martial arts kick is a much more exciting way to show off its high-torque motors and dynamic balance than, say, a boring technical spec sheet. These demos are built to capture the imagination of investors, regulators, and the public. It's a way to prove, visually, that these machines are moving beyond slow walking and into genuinely athletic motion.
But that's just one part of a much bigger picture. China really has 3 core goals here. First, massive installation. They want to put more industrial robots to work than any other country and just dominate factory automation. Second, humanoid experimentation. They're trying to create cheaper, commercially viable models that can break into brand new markets. And third, performance benchmarking. That 100-kilometer walk wasn't about the robot going on an adventure. It was about proving its joints, motors, and software could run for days on end without failing. It's a hardcore stress test. Okay, let's get into the weeds a bit, because the science that makes all this possible is genuinely fascinating. I mean, how do you actually get a super complex machine with all these joints and moving parts to copy the fluid movements of a dancer or a martial artist? Well, the secret is something called advanced motion imitation. The key thing to understand is that the robot isn't creating these moves itself. It's learning to copy them from a human, but with incredible precision. This is all about mastering physics-based control, not about a general thinking AI. So there's this research paper, and you gotta love the name. It's called Kung Fu Bot, and it basically lays out the whole process. It's really 2 main steps. First is motion processing. The system watches a video of a person, and it extracts the motion. But then, and this is the clever part, it filters and corrects that motion to make sure it's something the robot can physically do without, falling on its face. It adapts the move for a robot's body. Then you have step 2, motion imitation. This is where a learning program takes over. The robot basically practices that corrected move over and over in a simulation, getting rewarded for how accurately it copies the movement. It just keeps trying and getting better, until it can pull it off perfectly in the real world. So, knowing all this, it becomes pretty clear that we need to shift our focus. The flashy backflips and the dance moves, that's marketing. The real revolution is happening somewhere else entirely. So what are the true signs of progress we should actually be looking for? So what are those real signals? There are 4 big things to keep an eye on. First, actual industrial deployment. When do these robots move out of those caged-off pilot programs and start working full-time, regular shifts in a warehouse? That's huge. Second, something called robotics as a service. If a small business can just rent a robot for a month instead of buying one, adoption could just explode. Third, look for component advances. A robot is only as good as its parts, so pay close attention to any breakthroughs in things like more dexterous, human-like hands. And finally, cultural normalization. When seeing a robot in a mall or an airport just becomes normal, that's when the social barriers really start to come down. Look, in the end, the flashy demos are kind of a distraction. The real goal was never about a perfect backflip. It's about building a reliable robot that can run for hours without breaking down. A machine that can do the same boring, repetitive task for an entire shift without ever getting tired or making a mistake. So the real question isn't if these robots are real. The question is, what happens when they finally arrive, for real, on the factory floor?